Grand Overlord Ruhan sat on his throne made of black crystal and stared at the war reports on his floating screen. Another species had surrendered. They always surrendered. The Dominion of the 12 Suns had ruled the galaxy for over 8,000 years, and in all that time, not a single species had ever put up a fight worth remembering. 342 civilizations had bent the knee. Their worlds were absorbed, their people were put to work, and the galaxy kept spinning. Ruhan waved the report away with a long, clawed hand. He was bored. Deeply, painfully bored. The last interesting war had ended 3,000 years ago, and even that one had only lasted a few days. He leaned back and closed his 4 eyes, wondering if there was anything left in the universe that could surprise him. There was. On the outer rim of the galaxy, in a monitoring station that floated between dead stars, a young intelligence analyst named Kiva was staring at her screen with wide eyes. She had picked up a signal. It was crude and messy, bleeding across open radio frequencies, with no encryption, no quantum coding, no shielding at all. By Dominion standards, it was the technological equivalent of banging rocks together. She almost deleted it. But something made her look closer. The signal was not random noise. It was structured. There was language in it, complex and layered. There were mathematical equations. There was music. And buried deep inside the transmission, there were star maps. Whoever sent this signal was mapping their own solar system. They were measuring distances to nearby stars. They were planning to leave their world and go out into the dark. Kiva ran the signal through every database the Dominion had. No match. This was a species they had never encountered before. She traced the signal back to its source, a small yellow star in an uncharted arm of the galaxy. The third planet from that star was the origin point. She pulled up the planetary data and felt her stomach drop. The planet was a Class 12 death world. It had extreme gravity, a thick atmosphere made of nitrogen and oxygen that would burn the lungs of most known species. Massive oceans of salt water, tectonic plates that constantly shifted and cracked. Temperatures that swung from freezing to boiling depending on where you stood. And a star that bombarded the surface with radiation every single day. The planet was crawling with predators in every environment. The oceans, the forests, the deserts, even the frozen poles had creatures designed to kill. No sapient species in the Dominion's records had ever evolved on anything rated above a Class 7. This world was nearly off the scale. Kiva wrote her report carefully. She flagged the species as a potential threat. She recommended further observation and caution. She sent the report to her superior, a board administrator named Voshin, who read the first 2 lines, laughed, and downgraded the threat level to 0. He filed it under primitive curiosity and went to lunch. Kiva sat alone in her station and stared at the signal still scrolling across her screen. She had a bad feeling. The kind of feeling that sits in your chest and doesn't go away. Far across the galaxy, on the 3rd planet from that small yellow star, a man named Teho stood on the bridge of the largest thing humanity had ever built. The HSS Ironwake was not a beautiful ship. Nobody had designed it to be beautiful. It was 1.2 kilometers of layered tungsten armor, reinforced steel bulkheads, nuclear pulse engines, and enough weapons to make a planet nervous. It had 46 railgun batteries, each one capable of launching a solid tungsten slug at 3% the speed of light. It had missile bays loaded with kinetic kill vehicles. It had point defense systems that could track and destroy a coin thrown at supersonic speed. It was ugly and brutal, and the most dangerous thing that had ever left Earth's orbit. Captain Teho loved it. He was a quiet man with steady hands and calm eyes. He had spent 15 years commanding submarines in the deep oceans of Earth, where silence meant survival and patience meant everything. Space, he had decided, was just another kind of ocean, darker, colder, and infinitely bigger. but the rules were the same. Stay quiet, stay alert, and if something comes for you, hit it so hard it never gets back up. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Commander Hana, stepped onto the bridge with a datapad in her hand. She was sharp and direct, the kind of person who said exactly what she meant and never wasted a word. She had personally designed the Iron Wake's weapons array, and there was a rumor among the crew that she loved the railguns more than she loved most people. The rumor was probably true. Mission briefing, she said, handing the pad to Tejo. Deep Space Patrol, Sector 7 through 12, standard sweep. Tejo looked at the route. It would take them further from Earth than any human ship had ever gone. Crew status? Ready, mostly. Dowan hasn't slept in 38 hours. As if summoned by his name, Chief Engineer Dowan appeared from a maintenance hatch in the floor, covered in grease and holding a wrench. He was a thin man, with dark circles under his eyes, and the kind of restless energy that came from too much caffeine and not enough sleep. He was also the reason the Iron Wake worked at all. Every system on the ship had been modified, improved, or completely rebuilt by his hands at least twice. "The number 3 engine is making a sound I don't like," Dowan said, climbing onto the bridge. "I fixed it. Probably. 70% sure." 70%? Hana raised an eyebrow. 80 if you let me skip the safety briefing. "You're not skipping the safety briefing." "Then, 70. Tejo almost smiled. He turned to the main viewport. Earth hung behind them, blue and white and impossibly fragile against the black. Somewhere out there, beyond the light of their sun, the universe waited. They did not know what they would find. They did not know if anything was looking back at them, but they were going anyway, because that was what humans did. They went into the dark, not because it was safe, but because it was there. "All stations, prepare for departure," Tejo said. His voice was calm and steady, the voice of a man who had made peace with whatever was coming. "Take us out." The Iron Wake's engines fired. The ship shuddered, then surged forward, leaving Earth behind. The stars stretched and blurred, and the ship slid into the black silence of deep space, like a knife into dark water. On the outer rim of the galaxy, a Dominion scout frigate detected something entering its sensor range. The officer on duty checked the readings twice, then a third time. The object was massive, far denser than anything its size should be, and it was moving at a speed that should not have been possible for a ship with no apparent faster-than-light drive. It was pushing through normal space on raw engine power alone, and it was not slowing down. The officer opened a channel to Dominion Command. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. "Unidentified vessel detected. Profile does not match any known species. It is large, and it is heading directly into our territory. Request instructions." A long silence followed. Then, a single response came back. "Observe. Do not engage." The officer watched the unknown ship on his screen, a dark shape moving through darker space, and wondered what kind of creature would build something like that. Fleet Commander Ocean had conquered 11 species in his career. He had burned cities, shattered fleets, and watched entire civilizations fall to their knees before his armada. He was tall, even by Dominion standards, with silver-plated armor that gleamed under the cold light of his command bridge. He feared nothing in the galaxy, because nothing in the galaxy had ever given him a reason to. When the order came to intercept the unknown vessel, he took 40 warships. Standard protocol. 40 was more than enough to intimidate any species into surrender. Most gave up at the sight of 10. The Dominion's ships were elegant and powerful, built with smooth curves and energy shielding that could absorb almost any weapon known to galactic science. They were the finest warships ever constructed, and Ocean was proud to command them. Ambassador Terrell stood beside him on the bridge, rehearsing his speech. Terrell was a diplomat, soft-spoken and polished, with robes of deep purple and a voice like warm oil. He had delivered the same speech to 19 species. The words were always the same. Welcome to the Dominion. You will submit. You will serve. Resistance is not recommended. Every single time, the new species had listened, looked at the fleet surrounding them, and bowed. Terrell expected this time to be no different. Kiva had tried to warn them. She had sent urgent messages to Oshan's flagship, attaching everything she had translated from the human transmissions. She had found historical records, fragments of something called a world war, that described violence on a scale that made her hands tremble as she typed. Humans had split the atom and used it as a weapon, against each other, on their own planet. They had burned entire cities to ash, and then rebuilt them and kept going. Oshan had read the first page of her report, and tossed it aside. They haven't discovered energy shielding, he said to his second officer. They are primitives with a loud engine. This will take 10 minutes. The 40 Dominion warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel, in a perfect crescent formation around the Iron Wake. They surrounded it completely, a wall of gleaming ships on every side. It was a display of absolute power, designed to crush the spirit of whoever was watching. On the bridge of the Iron Wake, alarms screamed to life. Tejo stood from his chair and stared at the tactical display. 40 red contacts had appeared around his ship in the space of a heartbeat. They had come from nowhere, faster than light travel, something humanity had not yet achieved. Hana was already at her station, her fingers flying across the console. 40 ships, military configuration, they've boxed us in, classic intimidation formation. Energy signatures suggest plasma-based weapons and some kind of electromagnetic shielding. Tejo studied the display. His expression did not change. 15 years in submarines had taught him that panic was a luxury he could never afford. Are they charging weapons? Not yet. They're waiting. Then so are we. Open a channel. The main screen flickered, and Ambassador Terrell appeared. He was smiling, a wide and practiced smile that showed too many teeth. He spread his arms in a gesture of welcome and began his speech. Greetings, travelers. You have entered the sovereign space of the Dominion of the 12 Suns. We are the rulers of this galaxy, guardians of order and progress. Your vessel and your species are now under our authority. You will power down your engines, surrender your weapons, and prepare to be escorted to a processing station, where you will be assigned a servitude tier, appropriate to your capabilities. The Dominion is generous to those who cooperate. Resistance is not. No. Terrell stopped. His smile froze. He blinked several times, as if the word had been spoken in a language he did not understand. I am sorry, Terrell said slowly. Perhaps the translation was unclear. You will surrender your vessel and... I understood you perfectly, Tejo said. His voice was flat and calm. The answer is no. We do not surrender. We do not serve. And if you point those ships at us for much longer, you are going to have a very bad day. Terrell stared at the screen. In 19 first contacts, nobody had ever said no. He looked off-screen at Oshan, his composure cracking. Oshan stepped into view, his silver armor catching the light. You are alone, Oshan said. 1 ship against 40. You have no shields. Your weapons are primitive. You cannot win this. Surrender now, and your crew will be treated fairly. We have a different definition of fair, Tejo replied, and cut the channel. Oshan stood in silence for 3 seconds. Then he gave an order. Fire a warning shot, low yield, across their bow. A single Dominion cruiser fired a bolt of superheated plasma. It streaked across the gap between the fleets and struck the Iron Wake's forward hull. The plasma splashed across the tungsten armor plating like water on stone. The temperature readings spiked for a moment, then settled. On the Iron Wake's bridge, nothing shook. Nothing cracked. Nothing even flickered. Down in engineering, Dowen checked the hull sensors and reported over the comm. Minor thermal scarring on plate 7. Cosmetic damage only. I'll buff it out when I get a minute. Hana looked at Teiho. They hit us with their best shot and scratched the paint. Now they know what our armor can do. Let's show them what our guns can do. Power up the railguns. Target the nearest vessel. Do not fire. Just let them see it. The Iron Wake's weapon systems came online. Deep inside the ship, massive capacitors began charging, building magnetic fields of extraordinary power. The railgun barrels aligned and locked onto the nearest Dominion cruiser. On Oshan's flagship, sensor officers began shouting. They were reading the Iron Wake's energy buildup, and the numbers made no sense. The magnetic acceleration values were absurd. If those readings were correct, the human ship was preparing to launch a solid object at a velocity that the Dominion had only ever seen in asteroid impacts. Kiva's message flashed on Oshan's screen again. He read it this time. Commander, that ship is a kinetic weapons platform. They do not use energy weapons. They launch solid mass at relativistic speeds. Their projectiles will pass through our shields as if they do not exist. One shot will destroy any ship in your fleet. Please, pull back. Oshan hesitated. For the first time in his career, he hesitated. He hesitated too long. One of his captains, a young officer named Beshan, who had never seen real combat and wanted to prove himself, fired on the Iron Wake without orders. A full-power plasma blast struck the human ship's midsection. The Iron Wake rocked slightly. Alarms chimed. Dowan swore loudly over the comm, but the ship held. Teiho did not hesitate. Hana, 1 round, center mass. Hana pressed a single button. A tungsten slug the size of a man's forearm launched from the Iron Lake's forward railgun at 3% the speed of light. It crossed the distance between the two ships in less than 1 second. It hit the Dominion cruiser that had fired on them and went through it. Not into it, through it. The slug punched through the forward shields without slowing, through the outer hull, through 6 interior decks, through the reactor core, and out the other side. The ship did not explode in a ball of fire. It simply broke. It cracked apart like an egg, the two halves spinning away into the dark, venting atmosphere and bodies and light. Then there was silence. Complete, absolute silence on every Dominion bridge. Oshan stared at the place where one of his ships had been. His mouth was open. His hands gripped the rail in front of him so hard, his knuckles turned white. Teiho opened a channel. His face appeared on every Dominion screen, calm and steady and utterly without fear. That was 1 round from 1 gun, he said. We have 46 guns. I am going to give you 60 seconds to power down your weapons and back away. If a single ship fires on us again, I will not stop at 1. Your 60 seconds start now. Nobody on the Dominion side moved for 10 of those seconds. Then, slowly, one by one, the Dominion ships began powering down their weapons. Ocean stood on his bridge and watched his fleet obey a single enemy ship, and he felt something he had never felt before in his life. Fear. All ships, he said quietly, withdraw. The Dominion fleet turned and retreated into faster-than-light travel, vanishing like ghosts. The Iron Wake stood alone, in empty space, surrounded by nothing but stars and the drifting remains of a broken warship. On the bridge, Hana let out a breath she had been holding for 2 minutes. Dowan reported from engineering that the hull was intact, and the railgun capacitors were already recharging. Sergeant Unji, who had been standing ready with her boarding squad the entire time, lowered her rifle and looked almost disappointed. Teiho sat back in his chair. They were always steady. Send a full report to Admiral Sunwoo, he said. Tell her we made first contact. Tell her they have faster-than-light travel, energy weapons, and a very large empire. He paused. And tell her they started it. Far away on the throne world of Athara Prime, Grand Overlord Ruhan watched the sensor replay of the battle in complete silence. His advisors argued around him, their voices rising and falling like waves. Some demanded revenge, some demanded caution, some simply looked afraid. Kiva stood in the corner of the war chamber, holding her datapad against her chest. She did not speak. She did not need to. The replay spoke for itself. One shot, one ship destroyed, shields meant nothing. Ruhan raised a hand, and the room went silent. "Report," he said. One word, quiet and cold as deep space. Kiva stepped forward. Her moment had finally come. The war chamber of Aethera Prime was built to hold the 12 most powerful beings in the galaxy. The overlords of the 12 suns sat in a wide circle on thrones carved from the bones of extinct worlds, each one representing a solar system that had been under Dominion control for thousands of years. They had gathered for emergencies before, but not like this. The air in the room was different today. It smelled like fear. Kiva stood in the center of the circle, small and alone under the cold blue light. She was not an overlord. She was not a commander. She was an analyst, a reader of data and signals. And until 3 days ago, nobody in this room had known her name. Now they all stared at her, like she held their fate in her hands. In a way, she did. "Begin," said Grand Overlord Ruhan. Kiva activated her display. A blue planet appeared in the air above her, rotating slowly. Beautiful and terrible. "Earth. The species calls itself human," she said. "They originate from this world, the third planet of a small yellow star in an uncharted spiral arm. I have spent the last 70 hours analyzing every transmission, record, and data fragment we have intercepted from their civilization. What I am about to show you is not speculation. It is fact. And I want to be clear before I begin." She paused and looked around the circle. "Everything I warned about in my original report, the one that was dismissed, was correct." She let that hang in the air. Then she began. "Their homeworld is a Class 12 death world. I know many of you believe that sapient life cannot evolve on anything above a Class 7. The humans are proof that it can. Their planet has a gravity pull 30% stronger than our homeworld. Their atmosphere is 21% oxygen, a gas that is corrosive and combustible. Their world is covered in salt water that produces storms powerful enough to flatten cities. The ground beneath their feet shifts and cracks, causing earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Their sun bombards them with radiation that causes cellular mutation. And every environment on their planet, the oceans, the forests, the deserts, the frozen regions, is filled with predators." She changed the display. Images appeared showing human biology in clinical detail. They evolved as persistence predators. They do not have claws or venom or natural armor. Instead, they have something far more dangerous: endurance. A human can chase prey for hours without stopping. Their bodies cool themselves through liquid secretion from their skin, allowing them to run in heat that would kill most species. They heal from injuries that would be fatal to us. Broken bones mend, torn skin closes. They have a chemical response called adrenaline that, when triggered by danger, temporarily increases their strength, speed, and resistance to pain. They can continue fighting with injuries that should have stopped them. They do not go down easily. They do not go down at all. The overlords shifted in their seats. Overlord Mishon, an elderly female with gray-blue skin, leaned forward. "These are just biological traits. Many predator species are physically impressive. That does not make them a threat to the Dominion." "You are correct," Kiva said. "Their biology alone is not what makes them dangerous. This is." She changed the display again. Now it showed a timeline. A long, blood-red timeline stretching back thousands of human years. And every section of it was marked with war. Humans have been waging organized war against each other for their entire recorded history. Not against other species, against themselves. They fight over territory, resources, ideology, religion, pride, and sometimes for reasons that even they do not fully understand. They have developed weapons at a pace that no species in our records has ever matched. In less than 10,000 years, they went from sharpened stones to nuclear fission bombs, devices that split atoms and release energy equivalent to millions of conventional explosives. And they used them, twice, on their own cities. The room was very quiet. They then built more nuclear weapons, thousands of them, enough to destroy all life on their planet several times over. And they pointed these weapons at each other and said, "If you attack me, I will destroy you, and you will destroy me, and everything will end." They called this strategy deterrence. It worked. They did not destroy themselves. They found the line between total war and survival, and they walked it for decades. Overlord Drayan, a massive figure with scarred skin and a reputation for aggression, slammed his fist on his throne. "Then we strike now, before they build more ships. If they only have one." "They do not have only one," Kiva said quietly. "Not anymore." She changed the display. New data scrolled across the screen, intercepted from human communications in the days since the first contact. Within hours of our fleet's encounter with their vessel, the humans began emergency wartime production. Their orbital shipyards, which were already partially active, went to full capacity. Asteroid mining operations tripled their output. Factories on their planet's surface shifted from civilian production to military production overnight. In the 6 days since our fleet retreated, they have already begun construction on 11 new warships. 6 days, Mishan whispered. 6 days, Kiva confirmed, and these are not small vessels. Each one is built to the same standard as the Iron Wake. Layered armor, kinetic weapons, no energy shielding, because they do not need it. Their weapons are designed around throwing mass at extreme velocity. Our shields are designed to absorb and redirect energy. A solid tungsten slug moving at relativistic speed is not energy. It is just a rock moving very fast. And our shields cannot stop a rock. Ruhan spoke for the first time since the presentation began. "How fast can they build?" Kiva turned to face him. "Faster than us. Faster than any species we have ever encountered. Humans do not build the way we do. They do not plan for decades and construct with precision. They improvise. They adapt. They cut corners that should not be cut and somehow make it work. Their engineering is not elegant, but it is effective and it is fast. If we give them a year, they will have a fleet that matches ours in size. If we give them 5 years, they will surpass us." The silence that followed was the loudest sound Kiva had ever heard. Drayan demanded an immediate invasion, with every ship the Dominion could gather. Mishan argued for negotiation, for alliance, for anything that did not involve fighting a species that had practiced war the way other species practiced breathing. Other overlords took sides, voices rising, fists slamming, accusations flying. The great and mighty rulers of the galaxy were shouting at each other like frightened animals. Ruhan let them shout. Then he raised his hand, and silence fell. "We will do both," he said. "Assemble the first Grand Armada, 2,000 ships, and send another diplomatic envoy. I want options. I want to know if they can be reasoned with, and I want to be ready if they cannot." Far away, on Earth, Admiral Sunwoo read Taeho's report, in a room deep underground. She was an older woman with gray hair cut short, and eyes that had seen too much and forgotten nothing. She had commanded navies in 3 oceans before she was given command of humanity's space fleet. She read the report twice, set it down, and stared at the wall for a long time. Then she picked up her communicator and spoke to every shipyard commander in Earth's orbit. "This is Admiral Sunwoo. As of this moment, we are on a war footing. Every shipyard will operate at maximum capacity. Every factory on Earth with military capability will begin conversion. I want new ships, and I want them fast. I do not care if they are pretty. I do not care if they are finished. I care that they fly, and I care that they shoot. We have been alone in this galaxy for our entire existence. That is over now. Something is out there. It is bigger than us, and it wants us to kneel. She paused. We do not kneel. Get to work. The shipyards lit up like stars. Metal moved. Machines roared. Humanity did what it had always done when something threatened it. It stopped arguing with itself, looked outward, and began to build. On the Iron Wake, deep in Dominion space, Hana sat at her console, decrypting intercepted Dominion communications. She had been at it for hours, peeling apart layers of alien encryption, with a patience that would have impressed a safecracker. When she finally broke through, she did not smile. She did not celebrate. She went very still and read what was on her screen. Slave worlds. Hundreds of them. Species that had been conquered and forced into servitude for thousands of years. Mining colonies, where entire populations worked until they died. Breeding programs, designed to produce more obedient workers. Cultural erasure on a scale that made her sick. She brought the data to Tejo. He read it in silence. His face did not change, but something behind his eyes went cold and hard, like a door closing. Mark every slave world on the map, he said. All of them. What are we going to do? Tejo looked at the stars on his display. Somewhere out there, 2,000 warships were gathering to come and crush humanity before it could grow. He had one ship. He had a crew of 400. And he had just learned that the galaxy was full of people in chains. We're going to do what we always do, he said. We're going to fight. Down the corridor, Sergeant Unji heard the news from one of Hana's communication officers. She sat on her bunk, cleaned her rifle, and smiled. It was the kind of smile that would have worried anyone who saw it. The galaxy had no idea what was coming. Tejo had been studying the Dominion for weeks. Every intercepted communication, every tactical report, every battle record Hana could pull from their networks, he read it all. And what he found was simple. The Dominion fought the same way every time. They showed up with overwhelming numbers, fired energy weapons until the enemy's shields collapsed, and then moved in to finish what was left. It had worked for 8,000 years, because every species in the galaxy used the same technology. Energy shields and energy weapons, attack and defense built on the same principle. Humans did not use that principle, and Tejo intended to make the Dominion pay for not understanding that. He found the place he wanted on the star charts, a narrow stretch of space between two massive nebulae, dense clouds of gas and dust that played havoc with sensors and disrupted energy-based systems. The corridor was barely wide enough for a fleet to pass through in formation, and the nebulae on either side would weaken Dominion shields and blind their long-range scanners. Tejo called it the funnel. He sent his plan to Admiral Sunwoo with a simple message. Send everything to these coordinates. I need them now. Sunwoo sent everything she had. When the Dominion's first Grand Armada, 2,000 warships strong, entered the funnel, Fleet Commander Ocean expected to find one human ship hiding in the dark. He had brought overwhelming force. He had brought enough firepower to crack a moon. He was ready to end this quickly and restore the Dominion's pride. What he found was 12 ships. They hung in a line across the narrowest point of the funnel, blocking the way forward. 12 massive, ugly, brutal vessels made of dark metal and sharp angles. Some of them still had construction scaffolding welded to their hulls. One of them had scorch marks from an engine test that nobody had bothered to clean. They looked unfinished, rough, and mean, like weapons that had been pulled from the forge, still hot. Ocean stared at his tactical display. 12 ships. They had built 11 more warships in weeks. Kiva stood beside him on the bridge. She had been assigned to the Armada as a strategic advisor, a role she had not asked for and did not want. She looked at the 12 human ships on the screen and said what she had been saying since the beginning. "I told you, they have not even started yet." Oshan did not respond. He ordered the Armada to advance. 2,000 Dominion warships moved forward into the funnel. They filled the corridor from edge to edge, a wall of gleaming ships, stretching back farther than the eye could see. It was the largest fleet the Dominion had assembled in over 1,000 years. Tejo watched them come. He stood on the bridge of the Iron Wake, at the center of the human line, his hands clasped behind his back. Hana was at the weapons console. Dowen was in engineering, running final checks on systems that he had rebuilt 3 times during the journey. Unji and her Marines were in the boarding pods, sealed in and ready. "All ships," Tejo said over the fleet channel, "hold position. Do not fire until I give the order. Let them get close." The Dominion fleet advanced. Closer, closer. The front ranks entered optimal weapons range, then kept coming, pushing deeper into the funnel where the nebulae pressed in on both sides, like the walls of a canyon. "Now," Tejo said. All 12 human ships fired at once. 46 railguns per ship. 552 tungsten slugs launched simultaneously at 3% the speed of light. The first volley crossed the gap in less than 2 seconds, and hit the front ranks of the Dominion Armada like a hammer hitting glass. Ships broke apart. Shields meant nothing. The slugs passed through energy barriers as if they were not there, punching through hulls, through reactors, through the ships behind them. The front line of the Dominion fleet simply ceased to exist in a storm of shattered metal and venting atmosphere. Before the Dominion could react, the railguns had already reloaded. A second volley fired, then a third. Oshan watched his display in horror as dozens of his ships vanished in seconds. He shouted orders, trying to reorganize his fleet. But the funnel worked against him. The corridor was too narrow for his ships to spread out. They were packed together, and every shot the humans fired hit something. Then the drones came. Dowen had spent every spare hour of the journey building them. Thousands of small autonomous devices, each one little more than a thruster, a guidance system, and a dense metal core. Smart rocks, Dowen called them. They poured out of the human ships in clouds, flooding the funnel like a swarm of angry insects. They were too small for the Dominion's weapons to target efficiently, and too fast to dodge. They slammed into Dominion ships from every direction, punching small holes that added up to catastrophic damage. Ocean tried to adapt. He ordered flanking squadrons to push through the nebulae and come at the humans from the sides. 3 squadrons entered the dense gas clouds and immediately lost sensor contact with the main fleet. Their shields flickered and weakened in the nebulae's interference. And then they hit the mines. Tejo had seeded the nebulae with proximity mines days before the battle. The flanking squadrons flew straight into them. Explosions rippled through the gas clouds like lightning in a thunderstorm. Of the 120 ships that entered the nebulae, fewer than 30 came back out. 5 hours into the battle, the Dominion had lost 400 ships. The humans had lost none. Oshan was desperate. He ordered a concentrated assault on the center of the human line, focusing every available weapon on the Iron Wake itself. Hundreds of plasma bolts converged on Tejo's ship simultaneously. The Iron Wake shook. The hull groaned. Armor plates that had held against individual shots began to buckle under the combined bombardment. Temperature warnings flashed across every screen. A section of the outer hull glowed white-hot, and 2 railgun batteries on the port side went offline. In engineering, a power conduit exploded and threw Dowen against a wall. He hit the ground bleeding from a cut above his eye, pulled himself up, and started rerouting systems before he was fully standing. An officer told him they were losing power to the weapons grid. Darwin looked at the power distribution panel and made a decision that any safety manual would have called insane. He rerouted power from life support to the railguns. "We can hold our breath," he said into the calm, blood running down his face. "The guns cannot." The air recyclers went silent, the temperature began to drop, and the railguns came back online at full power. "All ships," Tejo said, his voice steady as stone. "Hold the line." They held. The battle raged for 9 hours. 9 hours of continuous fire, of ships breaking apart, of damage reports and emergency repairs, and the constant thunder of railgun salvos. The human crews fought without rest, without pause, without a single ship breaking formation. When systems failed, they fixed them. When weapons went down, they found new ways to fight. When sections of their ships were breached, they sealed the holes and kept shooting. By the 8th hour, the Dominion had lost over 800 ships. The humans had lost 2, and 6 more were damaged, but still fighting. The crew of the Iron Wake had been breathing recycled air for 3 hours. Some of them had passed out at their stations. Others had taken their places without being asked. On Oshan's flagship, reports came in from across the fleet. Morale was collapsing. Crews were refusing to advance. Captains who had never known defeat were begging for permission to retreat. They had never fought anything like this. The humans did not fall back. They did not negotiate. They did not surrender. They just kept firing, kept fighting, kept holding their ground with a stubbornness that bordered on insanity. Kiva appeared at Oshan's side one last time. She was calm, which somehow made everything worse. They call this trait stubbornness. It is considered their most defining characteristic. They would rather die than give ground. You cannot outlast them. You cannot frighten them. You cannot break their will because they do not believe it can be broken. End this while you still have a fleet to save. Oshan looked at his tactical display. 800 ships gone. His armada, the mightiest force the Dominion had fielded in 1,000 years, was being eaten alive by 12 rough, ugly ships crewed by small, soft-skinned creatures from a poisonous rock in an uncharted corner of the galaxy. He gave the order. All ships, full retreat. The Dominion armada turned and fled. 2,000 ships had entered the funnel. Fewer than 1,200 came out the other side. Behind them, the corridor was a graveyard of wreckage, a field of broken ships and scattered debris stretching for thousands of kilometers. On the Iron Wake, the battle was over. The bridge was dim, lit only by emergency lighting. Hana sat at her console with her left arm in a makeshift sling, broken in 2 places when her station had been hit by a shockwave. Darwin had finally collapsed in engineering, unconscious on the floor, with a wrench still in his hand. His team had covered him with a blanket and kept working. Unji sat in the boarding bay, cleaning alien blood from her rifle. Her squad had boarded and captured a crippled Dominion cruiser during the battle, the first time a Dominion vessel had been taken by force in 3,000 years. She had a bruise covering half her face, and she was smiling. Tejo sat in his command chair. The viewport in front of him was cracked, a long spiderweb fracture running from corner to corner. Through it, he could see the stars, cold and distant and indifferent to everything that had just happened. A message came through from Admiral Sunwoo. Her voice was rough with emotion, though she would never admit it. 20 more ships launching this week. What are your orders, Captain? Tejo leaned back in his chair. Every muscle in his body ached. He had not slept in over 30 hours. He had just fought the largest battle in human history, with 12 ships against 2,000, and he had won. He opened the comm channel. Tell them to bring coffee. The news traveled faster than light. It moved through Dominion communication networks, through smuggler channels, through the whispered conversations of enslaved peoples on 100 worlds. The First Grand Armada, The mightiest fleet the Dominion had assembled in 1,000 years had been broken. Not by a rival empire, not by a coalition of conquered species, by 12 ships. 12 crude, ugly, impossible ships, crewed by a species that nobody had ever heard of, from a planet that should have killed them long before they ever reached the stars. The galaxy changed overnight. On the slave world of Thessar IV, where an aquatic species had been forced to mine rare minerals on dry land for 600 years, the Dominion garrison woke up to find that their prisoners had stopped working. They stood in the dust outside the mines, thousands of them, their gills cracked and bleeding from the dry air, and they refused to move. When the guards threatened them, they did not flinch. They had heard about the humans. They had heard that someone had finally said no. On Vora Prime, a species of tall, gentle beings who had once been scholars and poets before the Dominion burned their libraries and put them to work in factories, the workers began to sing. Old songs, forbidden songs, songs from before the conquest that they had passed down in secret for generations. The Dominion overseers did not know what the songs meant, but the sound of them spreading from factory to factory, growing louder and louder, terrified them. On 17 worlds in a single week, revolts broke out. Small ones at first, refusals to work, blocked roads, sabotaged equipment. Then larger ones, guards overwhelmed, garrisons surrounded, communication arrays seized. The Dominion did not have enough ships to suppress them all, because those ships were debris drifting in a nebula. On Aethara Prime, Grand Overlord Ruhan watched his empire crack like ice in spring. The 12 overlords turned on each other. Drayan blamed Mishan for not supporting the war effort. Mishan blamed Drayan for starting the confrontation. 3 overlords quietly began negotiating their own separate surrenders. 2 others vanished entirely, fleeing to the outer rim with whatever wealth they could carry. Kiva stood before Ruhan one final time. She was tired. She had been tired for weeks, but her voice was steady. "The humans are not coming to conquer us," she said. "That is not what they want. They are coming to free the species we enslaved, and those species, once free, will do the rest. They have 8,000 years of anger stored inside them, and we gave them every reason to use it. The humans did not destroy our empire. They just showed everyone that it could be destroyed. The rest is gravity." Ruhan said nothing. He sat on his throne and stared at the empty seats around him where the overlords had once sat, and he understood that it was over. Humanity came, not slowly, not cautiously. They came the way they did everything, fast and loud and unstoppable. Admiral Sunwoo commanded a fleet of over 50 warships now, and more launched every week. Teho, promoted to Commodore despite his protests, led the forward battle group. Hana, her arm healed but still stiff, commanded the weapons division. Dowan, who had slept for 3 days straight after the Battle of the Dark Corridor and then immediately gone back to work, was now chief engineer of the entire fleet. Unji led the marine assault teams. They did not head for Aethara Prime. They did not target the Dominion's throne world or its military installations. Instead, Teho pointed his fleet at the slave worlds. The liberation of Thessar IV was the first. 3 human warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel above the planet, a technology they had reverse-engineered from the captured Dominion cruiser in a matter of weeks. The Dominion garrison on the surface numbered 2,000 soldiers. They had fortified positions, heavy weapons, and orbital defense platforms. Unji's marines hit the ground in drop pods at dawn. There were 200 of them against 2,000 Dominion soldiers. The battle lasted 4 hours. It was not close. The Dominion soldiers had never fought humans up close. They had heard the stories, but stories are different from reality. The reality was worse. The humans moved through the garrison like a storm. They were faster than their size suggested, stronger than their soft bodies should have allowed, and they simply would not stop. Unji herself took a plasma burn to her shoulder that scorched through her armor and blackened the skin beneath. She kept fighting. She cleared 3 rooms with her rifle in one hand and a knife in the other, before a medic finally got to her, and even then, she argued about stopping. When the garrison fell, the Marines opened the mining compounds. The aquatic prisoners stood blinking in the light, unable to understand what was happening. They had been slaves for 600 years. Freedom was a word from old stories, something their great-grandparents had whispered about in the dark. Unji walked up to one of them, a frail creature with cracked skin and clouded eyes, who was clearly very old. She knelt down in front of him so they were at the same level. She was covered in dust and blood, her armor scarred and dented, her face bruised. She looked like war-made flesh. "Nobody owns you anymore," she said. "You're all free." The old creature stared at her. Then he made a sound that the translators could not process for several seconds. When the translation finally came through, it was a single word, repeated over and over. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Unji nodded. She stood up, put her helmet back on, and walked back to the dropship. She had 14 more worlds to liberate this month. World after world fell. The human fleet moved through Dominion space not as conquerors, but as liberators, and the difference shook the galaxy to its foundations. Every species the Dominion had subjugated watched the humans arrive, fight, win, and then leave without taking anything. No territory claimed, no resources seized, no new masters installed. They just opened the cages and moved on to the next world. The final confrontation came when Ruhan gathered his last loyal forces. 500 ships, the remnants of a once-an-invincible navy, and launched a desperate attack on the human fleet. It was not a battle fought with hope. It was a battle fought with pride, the last act of an empire that refused to fade quietly. Tejo met them in open space, with 30 warships. The new ships were better than the originals, faster, harder, meaner. Humanity had learned from every engagement, adapted, improved. They had studied Dominion technology and merged it with their own, creating hybrid systems that were more effective than either alone. The battle lasted 2 hours. When it was over, Oshan's flagship drifted dead in space, its engines silent and its weapons cold. Tejo hailed him. "Commander, you fought with honor. Your crew will be treated with dignity. Stand down." Oshan appeared on screen. He looked older than the last time they had spoken, tired in a way that went deeper than his body. "What are you?" It was not a military question. It was something deeper, something almost philosophical. What kind of species does all of this? You fight like demons, you build like machines, and then you show mercy. You free our slaves, you offer peace. None of it makes sense. Tejo was quiet for a moment. "We know what it's like to be in chains," he said. "We did it to each other for most of our history. We are not proud of that. But we learned from it. We decided that if we ever had the power to free someone, we would use it. That's all. That's the whole answer." Ocean stared at him for a long time. Then he surrendered his fleet. Ruhan was deposed not by the humans, but by his own people. The Dominion fractured into independent systems, each one struggling to find its own way forward. Some fell into chaos, some found peace. The old order was gone, and nothing had risen to replace it yet. Admiral Sunwoo proposed the Galactic Accord. No empire, no masters, no servitude tiers, just a shared agreement to defend each other, trade fairly, and never allow what the Dominion had done to happen again. It was idealistic and impractical, and exactly the kind of thing humans would propose. Slowly, cautiously, species began to join. Kiva became the first non-human ambassador to Earth. She walked the streets of Busan on a spring afternoon. surrounded by the ordinary chaos of human life. People eating at street stalls, children chasing each other through a park, an old man feeding pigeons on a bench, a couple arguing about what movie to watch. None of them looked like the terrifying warriors who had broken an empire. They looked small, soft, and busy with the ordinary business of being alive. She wrote in her personal log that evening, "I have studied them for months. I have watched them fight with a fury that defies reason and a courage that defies logic. And now I watch them feed stray animals and sing their children to sleep. I do not understand them. I am beginning to believe that no one ever will, including themselves. But I am grateful, deeply, completely, endlessly grateful, that when they came to the stars and found a galaxy full of suffering, they chose to be kind." Years passed. The Galactic Accord grew. 200 species joined. Then 300. The galaxy was not perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was free. And that mattered more than perfection ever could. Commodore Tejo retired. He had never wanted command, and the moment the fighting was done, he gave it up. He moved to a small house by the sea in Busan, the same city where Kiva had walked on that spring afternoon. He kept a garden. He read books. He watched the ocean, and tried to remember what silence felt like. She had taken over the fleet's tactical division, and was busier than ever. But she always made time to sit on Tejo's porch, and drink tea, and argue about things that did not matter. Dowan sent engineering proposals from whatever shipyard he was revolutionizing that week. Unji sent postcards from across the galaxy, short messages from whatever world she was currently protecting, always signed with a small drawing of a smiling face. One evening, a young officer from the Accord fleet came to see Tejo. She was nervous, standing stiffly on his porch in her pressed uniform, clearly uncomfortable talking to a man whose name was in history books. "Sir," she said, "the galaxy still fears us. Even the species we freed, even our allies, they respect us, but they are afraid of what we could do if we ever turned that power against them. How do we show them we are not a threat?" Tejo looked at her, then turned back to the ocean. The sun was going down, painting the water in shades of gold and red. Somewhere in the distance, a fishing boat was heading home. "You don't," he said. "Fear takes time. You can't argue someone out of it. You can't prove it wrong with words. You just keep showing up. Keep helping. Keep being decent. Do it long enough, and the fear fades on its own. Not because they forget what you can do, but because they see what you choose to do instead." The young officer nodded slowly. She thanked him, saluted, and left. Tejo sat on his porch and watched the stars come out, one by one, over a sea that looked like the sky and a sky that looked like the sea. Somewhere up there, in the vast dark between the stars, the galaxy was changing. Slowly, imperfectly, and painfully, but it was changing. He finished his tea, set the cup down, and smiled.